Hey there guys, this is Victor with Victor Vector JKU. We're back in the garage for part 2 of the Evo Rockskin Builder Corners for the 4-door JK. Today, we're going to be getting into some of the fabrication topics that I have planned for this. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so let's talk about some of the plans that I have for these Evo Builder Corners. So part 1, you can already see I got some blue tape masked down. My plan is to make some tube fenders off of this. And then I'm also going to be trimming up the fender well clearance here because the Evo Builder Corner actually comes a little bit lower than what the factory sheet metal is. I'm going to be drilling a couple of holes in the rear corner here where I'm going to be installing some 3/4 inch turn signal indicators. Along with, one other thing that I want to do is I actually want to relocate my KC C2s for the rear that's going to be projecting the light for my perimeter lighting. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my marker here and I'm just going to basically put this along the inner body line and I'm going to run this along the entire inner fender well, and that's going to mark exactly where I need to cut the builder corner at to match it to the existing fender well cutout. Similarly, I've also gone through and I've put a mark down right here for what I need to cut off the sheet metal as well. I'm going to do that while this guy's off because it's going to make it a little bit easier for me. Alright guys, so you can see that I have the profile traced from the fender of the Jeep to the Rockskin Builder Corner. So basically what I'm going to do is I have my jigsaw set up with a steel cutting blade, and so I'm just going to go ahead and cut that profile out. Alright, so that cleans up the fresh cut edge. Everything's smooth for the transition points where I met the original cut to where I made my new cut. I also came through and I smoothed out the outer edge and inner edge. And now the last thing that I'm going to do is there's a few little imperfections and stuff along this outer perimeter here. I'm just going to go and touch this up and do kind of the same thing that I did with that light chamfer on this edge, just along the entire perimeter of the entire panel. Alright, so that gets me my chamfer across all the outer surfaces, and I think that's it's going to give it just a little bit softer of an edge. It's going to look a little bit cleaner with that. Alright, so now the next thing I'm going to focus on is figuring out how and where I want my KC Hilites C2 placed. So where I want to put it is I want to put it kind of back as far as I can on the rear corner. I have to keep in consideration the gas cap fill neck. Also, there is some structure in the fender well as well that's behind the outer sheet metal. And then there's also a pinch seam right back here. So basically what I started off with is I figured out how far from this edge of the gas filler to where that body seam is, measured that, marked it down. And then I kind of figured out, all right, based on that, where do I want this guy to be placed? And with all that considered, I figured out, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill 4 holes. I'm going to cut 3 sides and I'm going to score this bottom edge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to then fold that back and I'm going to have a hole drilled in here, and that's what I'm going to be mounting this guy to. So he's going to be folded back at a 90-degree angle. This guy's going to mount directly on top and he's going to be facing outboard. But because that panel that's on the inside, I can only have this be 1.5 inches depth into the body. I'm going to go ahead and mark my 4 holes, and then I'm going to drill it with a step bit. I'm going to cut the profile and cut out the tab that I don't want to have, and then I'm going to score this edge and I'll be able to fold it back after that. So I finished up my drill pattern. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back over based on the outside edges of the holes. I'm going to go ahead and mark where I want to cut. And I also set up for my little tab as well, so I'm just going to go ahead and mark this all out, and then I'm going to come over and start cutting it out. Alright, so there we have it. So that's the negative that I don't need to keep in here. And that leaves me with my nice cutout. And the only thing I have left to do is just put a little scribe in here, and I'll bend that tab back, and then I'll just go ahead and clean up the tab a little bit, clean up the rest of the surfaces, and we'll be good. Alright guys, so what I did was just put a little scribe along here, and what that's going to do is it's going to help me when I go to bend this back. It's going to make sure it bends straight across the line that I want it to. And what my plan to use to bend these is just going to be a couple of adjustable crescent wrenches, which I'm just going to hook on and bend it down. So what I'm going to do to get it started is I just have to get it bent a little bit. I'm just going to use my hammer and sort of tap it down. And I'm going to start off with just looking at a little bit less than 90 degrees and evaluate and see how that looks with the light. And I think I'm actually pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go a little bit less than 90 degrees, and that's going to get me a pretty good spot there. So I think I'm going to call that good right where it's at. So when I come back and do all the tube work for the fender flare, I'll lay down a bead of weld in here just to fill in the score that I put in for the bend. So now the last thing that I just need to do for this driver's side corner is I need to drill my 2 3/4 inch holes for the 2 turn signal indicators that I'm going to be putting into this rear corner here. Alright guys, so I went ahead and I measured and marked where I want my 2 3/4 inch holes to be placed. I'm going to line up the top of this marker light with the top of this hole. And then this one is center line. So I think it'll look kind of cool having the 2 marker lights and then the 4-inch round back here. So I'm going to go ahead and drill these guys. So that will wrap up the driver's side. I'm going to go ahead and transfer this on the passenger side. I'm going to do the same cutout for the KC C2. I'm going to do the 2 holes here for the 3/4 inch marker lights. And then additionally, I'm going to cut out the fender well. Alright guys, so I'm not going to cover all the process of what I'm doing for the passenger side rock skin, but what I will show you is how I'm going to match the fender well cutout so that it's as close passenger to driver as possible. So it makes it a little bit of a challenge. I can't just stack the metal on top of each other and have a perfect layover because these brackets here interfere with each other. So I'm going to put the brackets on top of each other. I'm then going to line up the corner here, here, up here, and up in the front. And once I get everything to a pretty close spot, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my marker and trace this line. And now it is also elevated off the plate, so it's not going to be a direct transfer. I need to kind of judge the angle of the pen to make sure I get the correct line. Now honestly, this doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because from passenger to driver's side, you're not going to notice if there's a little bit of a difference in where the wheel well cutout is. But I just like to get it as close as I can. So now I have it transferred and I'm ready to go ahead and start cutting that out. And then for the marker lights and the KC C2, I'm just going to go ahead and measure off the panel like I did before and place these holes just the same as I did on the first one. That way I know that I end up in the same spot, because if I try to trace this, there's no way that this is going to be close enough and I'll end up having to remark it anyways. So I'm just going to go ahead and use a tape, pencil, and mark it correctly. Alrighty guys, so I got all the patterns transferred from the driver's side over to the passenger side. I've got them all cut out and everything now is done with all the fabrication that I had planned before I throw the Evo Builder Corners back on the Jeep. Now before I do so, I'm going to have one little bit of an interference issue, and that's where these 2 tabs that are bent back into the body are going to interfere. So what I got to do is I actually got to cut holes on both sides in this location right here. So when I bring the builder corners back in, I don't have any interference. And also when I go to actually mount the light with final fitment, then I won't have an interference with the sheet metal where the light goes. So let's go ahead and go over here real quick and show you how I'm going to mark it up and cut it out. Alrighty guys, so in preparation for marking up and figuring out the exact location where I wanted to put the KC C2 in this fender panel, I had to account for one thing, and that's going to be this body line that's right here. So this is where the rear fender panel as well as the rear corner panel tie together, and there's a pinch seam behind there where the 2 are joined. So I didn't want to have to cut that out, and so what I did was I made that my hard edge that I couldn't go any further back on. I went ahead and I measured basically the distance from the filler cap to the body line. I have my measurements that I took from the builder corner and I transferred them over here. So basically what I'm looking at is my distance down from the fill cap where the top of the panel needs to be cut. I have another mark for where the bottom of the panel needs to be cut, in addition to the width that I need to cut from this body line over. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut flush to the body line or near flush, and that should make it a perfect little cutout to fit the KC C2 in. So next up what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get a punch. I'm going to put in 4 holes and then I'm going to come out with my jigsaw and cut this out. Now there is a reinforcement behind here that I need to keep in consideration, so depending on how far the jigsaw blade will go into the panel, I may actually have to use an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel to take this out. Alright, so I got my 4 holes punched. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use my drill bit here. I'm using a step drill bit, and I'm going to go ahead and drill this guy out to 3/8 of an inch for each of these. That'll be ample space for me to be able to get in there with my jigsaw. All right, so I went ahead and looked, and the structure panel on the backside is too close for me to be able to use my jigsaw, so what I'm gonna use is my angle grinder with cutoff wheel. And so one thing I'm using is this little deburring tool. This thing's pretty handy. I just got this guy at Home Depot, I don't know, like maybe 10 bucks or something. This guy is really cool to have. It's great for like small diameters or something, or thin metal where you can just sort of scrape off the burrs. Really handy, and did a good job cleaning up an interior surface there that I couldn't get otherwise. So next what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the driver's side, bring it into place, look and see how things look lined up, and make sure that this hole is cut out appropriately to be able to fit the panel on with the light. All right, so without actually bolting this down, it looks like I need to take just a little bit more off this forward edge. So I'm gonna take just a little bit more off there, and we'll call it good. Alrighty guys, so just finished the additional cutout, and there it is with the light in place. I think it's gonna look pretty slick once I get this all wrapped up. One last area that I have to clearance is going to be right here. So that's just to match it to what the builder corner is gonna be at. So I'm gonna go and use my angle grinder again with the cutoff wheel, cut that guy off. Alright, so the last thing I'm gonna do before I go and mount the builder corners back on the Jeep, I'm gonna strip the inner side of the skin. And I'm gonna go ahead and coat that with some of this SEM 40773 zinc weld. Basically what this is a weld through primer. Not that I'm going to be welding on the backside, but I want to go ahead and put down a coat or two first, because once I put these guys on, I'm going to be working on building my tube flares off of it. Since the panel itself has to form to the body a little bit, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to take it off and final weld it off of the Jeep. And so if I'm not able to take it off and do a final weld off, then I want to make sure that I have the backside already coated so it's rust protected. That way if I can't take it off due to deformation and the difficulty of putting it back on, then it's already painted and I just have to paint the outside and we're going to be good. So I'm going to go ahead, clean up the backside, lay down a couple of coats of the zinc weld, and then tomorrow we'll come back at it and we'll go ahead and slap these guys on and start looking into the tube flares. I'm getting excited.